please take the steps to go find alignment, and you will not regret it.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bello. Today, I've got two amazing guests. I actually just had a chance to connect with them and be on their show. We're doing a back-to-back today. So Matt Cavanaugh and Tim Winfrey. He did say he is not related to Oprah, so let's just get that out of the way. You mentioned it, so I had to bring it up. Like my mind hadn't made the connection when we first started. But why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourself? Maybe Matt, we'll start with you, and then Tim, we can roll over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Again, it's a pleasure to be on your show, and we had so much fun chatting with you. So excited to be on your show as well. So for me, I was a math teacher turned B2B salesperson. I just knew I wanted more. And as a result of being in the corporate world, got a sense of that and just realized I craved the freedom that came with entrepreneurship. So I got in the real estate game as an agent, then team leader, and now we run some other businesses as well, one of which is the Freedom Chasers podcast. And we've dedicated pretty much the rest of our lives to helping people attain the freedom that we've gone on the journey of obtaining. So, tying that teaching that I did, 10 years ago back into play, we are on a mission to help inspire people to live the lives they want to live.
I love that. Tim, how about you?
Cool, man. So I am second generation. So, I was kind of, built up from the ground, essentially. So my dad was a single father. So, I've been going on showings ever since I was a very young child. So, it's always been a part of my life. I kind of ended up just kind of rolling into it on accident. My dad needed help on flips. So, I kind of started at the ground level. I was doing it like as soon as sixth grade. And it just kind of kept growing, So, I started doing demo. And I started doing just about anything else. So, I could do anything but plumbing now, and that's a choice. So, I think over the course of like 2012 to 2015 or so, we did probably about 60 flips. And then I was doing BPOs on the side at the same time. So I actually got this, I just randomly saw this Craigslist ad for an REO broker. He's like, I need somebody that knows how to do repair estimates and how to evaluate properties. And I was just like, well, I am basically the perfect fit for this role. I sent him an email and he basically called me and hired me on the spot because I was literally a perfect fit. Literally. So from there, I managed the front end of REOs for 2 years. So we were doing several hundred transactions a year. So, that was when REOs were still kind of a big thing. Yeah. Unfortunately, towards the tail end of 2016, I believe, no, actually it was early 2016, the REOs just started drying up, so they just weren't around anymore. And, the big companies, they started, they called it right sizing, but what they were doing is getting rid of the agents with the lower scorecards, and they were just keeping the top ones, right? So the REO business was gone. So we transitioned me into like an acquisitions role. So then I transitioned over. We found money partner. This guy had like millions and millions of dollars. So I was just flipping houses full time that year. So we did 25 that year. And then I just kind of transitioned out of that. I was only making 10%, and I was doing most of the work. I was finding the house, I was managing the contractors, and I was just like, this is a lot of work for 10%. So I just kind of went off on my own a little bit. And, life takes you where it takes you, right? So, I've done so many things, retail, wholesale, everything, off market.
It's interesting to hear like the journeys. And I know you guys asked me that on your show too. And I kind of shared like worked in oil and gas and did that. And I learned a lot of stuff, even though I would never want to go back. Like I have to say I did learn quite a bit. And all those little experiences of, getting 10%, like the wholesaler that I joined in 2018, we had a $10,000 assignment fee and I made like $2,000, right? I had like such a small percentage relative to the size of the commission. And I remember just being like, man, I did all the work. I found the deal. We didn't even do paid marketing. This was my own self-generated lead. And you start thinking, this isn't really fair, or you want more. But I think the grass always appears to be greener. But as soon as you start to learn, your eyes are open. And now you had the knowledge to no longer have to just take that 10%. You're like, dude, I could take what I know now and go keep 100% over here. Why am I still doing this? Or even Matt, with you, you said you were a teacher, you still love to teach, but you're just doing it in a different way now that's more scalable and can get you a higher salary than maybe that teaching role, or higher income than that teaching role would have gotten you back in the day. And you can help so many more people than just like the 30 people in that classroom, going forward. So it's all part of the journey. And I appreciate you guys, being here in that quick intro. So it sounds like, real estate is something that we all obviously hold near and dear to our heart here on this call. And freedom chasers, I think that is something that really resonates with my audience, because entrepreneurs are the crazy people who would rather work 80 hours a week for themselves instead of 40 hours a week for someone else, right? Is that kind of the vibe that you guys had when you got into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, 100%. And, for me, like freedom started all the way back from the beginning. Like, I feel like I've had that virtue in me. Like, I know some people are a little bit more okay with the idea of just flexing to their situation. I, from a very young age, started to realize that like I had big ideas, big visions, and I wanted to be able to make any situation I was in better. What was interesting to me was how my ideas weren't always welcome in these certain situations. Like
Right.
my ideas on education reform while I was a teacher weren't well received. Now, looking back, maybe it's like, hey, you're a 21-year-old kid. What do you really know? But then I went to the corporate world, and again,
Same.
it was like you were always infringing upon somebody's job. You were or I was building something that was too risky for a company to adopt, because what happens if it goes wrong? Somebody's job is lost.
Yep.
And so it got to a place where it's like, well, I needed to learn how to be like this behaved person, be crazy civilized, or I need to like be able to fully express my ideas in the world. And it got to a place where that calling was just way too strong. And so I didn't want to fight that calling my whole life. And so for me, like when I think of freedom, I just think of like people being able to experience joy every single day,
That's
like
awesome.
all throughout their day doing what they do. So to be able to do that now, like, and actually experience it, like for a long part of my early career journey, it was an ideal that I was willing to die for.
Yeah.
Now it's like that we're experiencing it. It's like, no, I have to deliver. Like I have to create content so that people can have that opportunity and know that they should take the next step. They should do whatever it takes. 85% on the polls are showing that people are unhappy with their job. And like one of the things I think about is 24 hours in a day, 8 of them you're sleeping if you're following traditional guidance.
Mm-hmm.
So you have 16 waking hours, and 8 of them or more are spent at work, usually 10 if you count commute.
Yeah.
So half to 2/3 of your life is miserable if you're unhappy at your job. And that's just not a reality I was willing to accept. And so
I love that. And I know so many people listening right now, especially those who are still trying to escape the job. They're like, man, I need to go check out that Freedom Chasers podcast. And like, how do I get there? And how do I connect the dots? And that side hustle, how do I make it profitable enough to quit my job and go into that thing full time? How about you, Tim? Was there anything you wanted to add to that? I'd love to hear, the dynamic duo, different insights, different, backgrounds.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, I've been in real estate most of my life, right? But I started off, at a very low pay per hour role. Eventually my dad was paying me like 25, 30 bucks an hour. So, I mean, that was solid, right? And then I moved to a salary role when I was doing the REO things, right? So, I mean, that wasn't commission based. And then when I was doing the flips, it was 10%, right? So that was commission based, and that was my first experience with commission based, but I felt like really tightly in a box there. Like I could only do this one thing and I can only do it this one way, right?
Yep.
And I've had jobs until I was like 30, until I really took the leap into the entrepreneur thing. And like for me, everything clicked right away, because every job I had, and this was every single one of them, right? Like I would kick ass for like 12 months. And I would be like, I need more, I need more, I need to grow more. And there would just be a plateau, right? This plateau that I cannot break through this glass ceiling. And I did everything I possibly could. So, I mean, I just got sick of it. I'm like, if I want to live the life I want to live, the only way to do so is if I am in control of it. That's the only way. So
100%.
I mean, it was so natural for me. Like as soon as I took the leap, I mean, I got to 6 figures in like 3 months.
I love that. I love that. Have you guys read or heard of the book, The Millionaire Fastlane, by chance?
Yeah.
So I listened to it on Audible a couple of years ago when I was in a job that I wasn't happy with, or like I was tired of, and I'm reading it again. I just ordered the physical book, but he talks about like the sidewalk, the slow lane, and the fast lane. And I'm pretty sure like the slow lane, the part that I'm reading now, the slow lane is like the corporate job, put a little bit of money into your 401k, work for 40 or 50 years, and hopefully you have enough to retire and, maybe go on a couple of nice vacations. And that's the thing. Like we all run into that of like hitting that plateau, especially Matt. I could resonate with that so much. I wrote that down, how you hated like the red tape, the bureaucracy. Like it takes so much pulling teeth to get any projects off the ground or to really make a proposal that is considered and actually acted upon, right? So I felt that same way. I came in out of college, like young buck, all these ideas. I learned all this cool stuff. I'm ready to apply it here. And then you have all like the senile old people that are like, we've tried that before, doesn't work. We don't have the resources. That's not a priority right now. And it didn't take long, like 3 years in. I'm sure you guys felt this way too. You kind of just like tuck your tail between your legs. And like, I think the term now people are saying is quiet quitting or something. Like you apparently kind of just like give up.
Don't work as hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Emotionally, you're just like, all right, I'm just going to show up and do the bare minimum. And because you're not getting paid, like whether you do 100% more than the person next to you, you're going to get paid the same and maybe get a tiny bonus at the end of the year. Whereas Tim, you said when you went off on your own, it took 3 months to make 6 figures, like uncapped potential, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the joy that you have, I don't know if you're familiar with Jordan Peterson, but he's somebody that I listen to periodically. And he talks about the idea of you need to become a monster, but then harness it so that you're a kind person. Like nobody fears the man who's weak, right? So become strong and then choose how to use your strength.
Ooh,
and
that's good.
So my opinion, and this is no disrespect to anybody that wants to be in a W-2, but for those that don't want to be in a W-2 and are, my encouragement to you is don't be the weak man or woman. Do what it takes to become the you that you want to be. It's worth it. It's 100% worth it. Even if there's a lot of struggle and a lot of failure. Like you talk about quiet quitting. I think this is a really interesting thing because so what happened for me in school, I hated school and I hated it so much. I read books, like 60 books a year now. And I read like almost 0 in school. I would do my second period homework in first period and my third period homework in second period.
Oh yeah.
And my first period homework in the last period. And I just, whatever didn't get done after 6th period, like it didn't happen. So I quiet quitted school. It was like, hey, this is my 8 to 3.
And you were a teacher. That's the funniest part.
I ended up being a teacher, right? Like, probably why I didn't fit in the system, I guess. But yeah. So I think like it's just so important. And I actually bought a domain. We haven't launched a website or anything, but it's called notocollege.com. And just because like I'm so passionate that people need to move in the direction of their alignment.
Yeah.
Because burnout, I think, comes because you're in something too long that's not truly aligned. And one thing that I'd like to talk about is like what alignment looks like. So you got mental alignment. So you got the alignment with your natural intellectual capabilities. And then you've got like your intuitive alignment. Like, does it allow your creative senses to actually come out and for you to problem solve? And then you have heart alignment. Like, does the thing you do serve people and does it fulfill like your deeper psychological meaning? And I think when people are fortunate to find the thing that has all those, they can work tirelessly forever and it never stops and they're in flow. But if you're missing one of those legs, you could do it for a while, but you're typically going to experience burnout in 1 to maybe 10 years. Mm-hmm. If you have 2 legs missing, you're going to get miserable much, much faster. So I think it's worth it. Like if anybody's listening, like it's worth it. Just please take the steps to go find alignment and you will not regret it.
I love that. And just investing in yourself is the best investment you can make, right? So a lot of people are afraid to do that. They're afraid to kind of bet on themselves when really that's how you can explode. You can have that kind of insane income that you'd never get at a day job. They're just like, hey, you're doing a great job. Cool. I saved this company millions of dollars during my time there on various projects. And I never saw a dime of that. Like imagine asking them, hey, could I get 10% of what I saved you guys? They'd laugh in my face versus here. If I went and did that like as a consultant or something, you can get that kind of agreement and arrangement. Tim, you're laughing over there. You're just like, what do you
absolutely
say?
Well, I mean, I kind of wanted to get into a few things.
Let's do it.
I wanted to comment on fear and failure because Matt kind of mentioned this. And it's just like, if you are somebody out there that thinks that you're capable of big things and your big holdup is failure or fear, like those things are so easily mitigated, right? So first off, failure is the way, right? The only way to get to where you want to go is by failing until you figure it out, right? So, I mean, failure is the path. It's not something to be avoided ever. And in terms of fear is just a relative thing, right? So, I mean, fear is something you get at the beginning, but once you do something and you do it over and over and over again, there's power in consistency. There's power in practice. That fear disappears. And we were kind of talking about the W-2 thing a little bit. So I wanted to throw this out there. If anybody's out there is a W-2 employee, did you know that 70% of people that ask for a raise get one? Go ask for a raise. And also, did you know
buddy.
that the easiest way to get a raise, if they refuse to give you one, is to get a new job. So if you're not constantly asking for raises and looking for new jobs, you're probably going to hit a plateau. So, I mean, if I was going to go the traditional route, I would ask for a raise until they stopped giving one to me, and then I would go get a new job.
100%. That's the highest pay increase, is just hopping jobs. So if you've been somewhere for 2 years and you feel like your ideas aren't valued, for those of you listening still in W-2, just find opportunities, but also got to be smart about it, right? You can't just quit your job and then go try to find one, because now you don't have any leverage. You want to act like this is a pretty good job and I'm only going to leave if it makes sense. And now you can play them against each other, right? This is kind of like even with offers on a listing. I do it all the time. Hey, we have multiple offers. If you really do, that's an awesome position to be in, because like, I don't really need your offer. We're about to sign one, bro. Right? So you're going to submit your very best. It may be way higher than the other ones that I have. Same thing with those opportunities. They're going to be like, gosh, we really want this talent. It's got a great resume. Hopefully, if everything lines up, they'll give you a way better offer than, hey, I just quit my job. I'm looking for another one. I need a job. You know, you might end up taking that first one. Same thing with offers. You may end up taking that first one that's not even that great. So learning these skills is very important, but I love those tips that you guys are providing to really just follow your dreams, take that leap. Failure is the path. Dude, that goes against the entire school system. If you fail, you got to drop the class in college or something, right? If you fail one test, there's really no coming back from it sometimes if there's only 3 tests in a midterm, right? So we're taught from a young age that failing is bad, and you don't want to show that report card. Your parents are going to yell at you and be upset. You're going to get into timeout. And now you're saying that failure is the path, which is kind of like you have to reprogram your brain entirely. Totally. How have you guys done that?
Oh, dude, let's
dive into that.
System.
Like, how did you start 100%. Doing it?
So in the school system, your work is your own. Cheating is obviously like it's punishable by suspension, expulsion, etc. Yeah. The real world, you can do whatever you want to get the answers. You know what I mean? Like it's collaboration's encouraged. Like, can you produce the job? You know, I mean, obviously there's some things that government things that you have to do alone or take tests on. Like I passed my real estate on my own accord, so on and so forth. Right. But in the world, after you pass your test, like, it's not like it's like, hey, you're helping a client. You need to figure out how to write this addendum and you can't ask anybody for help. And by the way, you have 30 minutes, you know, otherwise you fail. Like, so to me, like, I mean, I get there's a sense to where we have to understand like what kids know individually. So there has to be some tests, but to see that there's such a discongruence between what happens in the real world and what happens in school is kind of alarming. Like we're not arming kids with the skills of like, hey, you don't have to personally be able to come up with the answer. You just need to know where to get it. So we don't teach kids that are wildly social, like, hey, you can use your charm to persuade the intellectual person to give you the answers. And maybe then you give them some social access, right? Like those types of things. Or so I just feel like the school system doesn't mirror the real world. And so as a result, you know, sometimes people take that mentality, and how it manifests is this: people go into the world with way too much DIY mentality. Instead of going into the world, and you read this in the books that you talked about, right? The gap in the gain, and then there's a who, not how.
Who, not how. So good.
So it's like most people should be thinking, if I've got a problem, not how can I do the problem, but who can I go get that can do the problem for me? So I could save myself the learning and the cost. And so I would say number one is just reframing those thoughts in the school system. And now for people that are out of it, like collaborate, you know, get yourself, I mean, your example when we came on our show was, hey, I went and found somebody in my area, my age, that was doing it. And that was enough for me. So go find somebody doing it, collaborate, and let them propel you much, much faster.
Yeah. You know, something funny too, Tim, I don't want to cut you off or anything. I was like, my business coach will always kind of laugh and poke fun at how your college professor rolls up in like a beat down Toyota Corolla that's like duct taped together, the bumper's about to fall off, and they're teaching you about entrepreneurship or business, versus like having the business coach who has like really cool cars in the garage, is financially free, is actually living it. So going on YouTube and learning from someone who's actually doing it today, you get more value from free videos sometimes than you did from an entire semester back in school. That's my perception. Tim, did you have anything you want to add to that too? Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So like one thought about school is like they train out like all the best skills that you could have, right? Like if you're a loud, charismatic kid, you're a problem child, right? And it's like, that's actually an amazing skill to develop. Like the school actually deadens a lot of quality traits that people should be working on because they want these kids to be obedient in school and just doing their homework. And it's just, they're not really taking advantage of any sort of skill building at all.
100%.
Like how relevant is most of school? Like math is pretty useful, but like what else?
I mean, sort of, not really. Like you could just, dude, in Excel, we talked about that on your show. I'm a nerd about all the Excel spreadsheets and pivot tables. All you need are like simple multiplication and percentages and division here and there. You're not doing like the square root. Like I don't think I've ever used a square root. Maybe if you're an engineer or something, I guess, but like, I don't know. Maybe you did that, Tim, because you said you did so much real estate stuff. But as a real estate agent, I look at the appraisal, I see the square footage. I don't need to know what the square root of anything is, right? But I remember kind of throwing shade at just teaching and how the school system's broken. You know, entrepreneurs always talk about that. It's a waste of money. College degree is an expensive piece of paper these days. And it's almost like not even worth going unless you're going to be like a doctor or like some kind of structural engineer where you got to build bridges and stuff. And a teacher kind of got a little bit upset and, you know, took it personally and replied back saying, hey, that's not fair. You know, we do our best. And I'm like, hey, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus. I'm not saying you individually are the problem. It's just the way that it has been just for so long. It's kind of just spitting out and training factory workers who can get plugged into other corporations and just be worker bees. That's kind of the thing that we are seeing more and more of is just they're spitting out corporate drones who can go and like follow directions all day and not challenge the system or not pursue those visions and dreams for themselves.
Yeah. And so the question I think that comes out of that is like, well, what should somebody do? You know, maybe somebody's not entrepreneurial at the core. Like maybe they're more introverted or something. So how do they go from that to a place where, you know, and I think it's a lot of it's modeling, you know, so you have certain people that are born with certain levels of visionary capacity and certain people that aren't. So my encouragement to somebody that maybe they know, like they're not meant to be a worker bee or a drone, but maybe they don't have the ability to vision their own life. Like, I think what they can do is go hitch their wagon, not necessarily as an employee, not just in proximity, go hitch yourself to someone who is, because someone who is can't help it. Like I'm one, like I cannot help. Someone comes to me and says, hey, what can I do with my life? Here's my circumstances. Like there could be no more joyful question for someone to ask me. I'm like, well, let me, because this 5 minutes or 10 minutes I might spend with this person, if they take the advice, could change the trajectory of their life forever in catastrophically positive ways. And so you don't have to vision your own life in that way. Like you can go hitch to a visionary, allow them to brainstorm for you, pull in what you like, take what you like. Don't be worried about offending a visionary because they're not going to take it. They're not going to be offended anyways. Pull out what you like from what they say and then just go for it. I just don't want anybody who doesn't have an own vision for their life to be stopped.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
That's such good advice.
Yeah. I would love to comment on what Matt said because it is so true. Like we actually met each other through like a random Facebook message like 4 years ago. And then he just called me. He's like, hey man, you want to call and talk about this? And I'm just like, yeah, I guess. And just coincidentally, right? Just a couple weeks before I actually listened to his interview on like the GSD mode. And I'm just like, oh dude, I'm just like talking to this dude that was on a podcast a couple weeks ago. He just wants to call me. Like, this is nuts. So yeah, I mean, Matt is just, I mean, I feel the same way. I would love to help anybody else, but like this guy's been doing it forever. And I would like to talk about the introversion thing too, and self-awareness in general, right? Because if you don't have self-awareness, you're probably going to mistype yourself. You know, I mean, this is so like common out there. Like I thought I was an introvert until I was like 30. I'm not an introvert in any way, shape, or form. But I thought I was. So guess what happened in reality? I was an introvert because I was like an insecure extrovert, right? So I mean, if you don't really dive deep and try to figure out who you are, you might think you're a totally different person than you are. I mean, you do. I could guarantee you without a single thread of doubt, you're wrong.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so interesting. So Chris, just stop us if we keep talking too much.
No, I love it.
One thing I want to talk about with that, Tim, which I think is so valuable, because I do a lot of personality studies. So like being involved in church growing up and being a teacher, like they're constantly evaluating psychological markers with these different, Myers-Briggs, all these different tests. I've studied a lot about the Enneagram, et cetera. And so as a result of taking in all these assessments, you start to see certain things. One thing that I believe I've found, I'm not making any like scientific statements here, but I believe that the introversion extroversion is kind of a myth. And so is energy. So like a lot of people say I'm a high energy person or I'm a low energy person. I'm not saying people don't in practice act like introverts and extroverts because that's how they are the majority of the way, but I don't think it has to be that way. So for example, I have certain people in my life, if I'm around them, my energy goes from 100 to 0 in 10 seconds. I could walk out the door and meet somebody else and my energy goes back to 100 based on who I'm around, what I'm talking about, etc. So if I'm talking about the weather, my energy is between 0 and 10. If I'm talking about how can we help somebody change their life, I'm at 110. And so like one thing I think that's important, like that's going along with what you're saying is like introversion, energy, et cetera, I think is a function of alignment. To the degree that you're aligned with who you are and your purpose, you're going to experience energy. And to the degree that you're not, you're not. So I think that's also a way people can do some self-reflection is, do I have low energy? Do I have this? Like, do I have these problems?
Yeah.
It's probably a means of a misalignment.
Geez, that's so good, Matt, because we talked about that too earlier. We hated reading before, and now we love reading because the types of books that we're reading, just we're more interested. We want to pick it up. And I never had that feeling. So I just assumed I hate to read because I didn't want to read that big old Seabiscuit book about some horse running around the track for summer reading. I was like, oh, this feels like a chore. This book feels like it's never ending. And now I just like, I'm reading before bed. I'm reading in the morning as part of my routine. And so really being in alignment, that's a very important word. But also knowing about yourself, it is very helpful at times to take those tests, figure out your personality type, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram. I've done that as well. And you're like, wow, okay, so that is my weakness. I know I need to work on that. I know this is a strength of mine. Maybe I lean into it more, but we also want to be careful to not really hold that as our identity, right? Like Tim, you said you thought you were an introvert. And so you kind of acted it. You projected of being an introvert because you assumed that you were one when really you just were an extrovert that needed a little bit more confidence through repetition, right? Competence leads to confidence. As you do it more, you become more confident. You realize, okay, I know my stuff. I can talk to girls or whatever. I can do real estate deals. And it becomes easier and easier to do. To go up to that random person and ask them on a date or whatever the situation may be. Ask that person for the listing or for the deal.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I was a cocky introvert, or I thought I was a cocky introvert. So I always had confidence to a degree. I was afraid of approaching people, right? And I was afraid of that simply because I didn't do it enough. And rejection, certainly. I'm an Enneagram 3. I'm not a fan of rejection at all. So I really want to throw this alignment thing out there too, because like when you're doing something that you're totally aligned with and it really fits your values, it doesn't feel like you're working at all. Like it almost feels like it just happens.
Yeah.
So like if you really find that alignment, I mean, it's like a jet stream. Like it just carries you wherever you want to go.
Right. And that's what they say. If you do what you love, like you'll never really work a day in your life because it doesn't feel like work. You're not being forced to do things that suck your soul out from your body under fluorescent lights in a corporate setting. It feels like it's been a 10-hour day and you see it's only 9 o'clock. You're like, oh my gosh. Whereas if you're in flow, like we talked about, Matt, you said, we talked about flow and being in that flow state, time flies by and you're like, oh man, it's already 2 o'clock. I didn't eat lunch yet. Like, let me go take a quick break. I'm so involved in what I do because I love it that I just want to do this all the time.
100%. Yeah. And I think too, the thing that the nuances I'm discovering is that there's partial flows. And so I feel like I've gone on these iterations. So it's like in my first part of my journey, I went as a teacher because I have a heart for people.
Yeah.
So I overdosed on the heart part of who I am, but it didn't serve the other parts. It didn't allow me to be intuitive. It didn't allow me to use my intellectual mind in the way that I wanted. And so it wasn't complete. And then I went into the business world, which allowed me to obviously get all my provisions met in a much better way. It allowed me to be creative in some ways, but it's still a corporate setting. I think this is why like you have people that go 3 to 5 years, love what they do, but then still want to switch. Yeah. And so, I think the big thing is understanding, okay, are you in a single flow or are you in like a total flow?
That's so good. And just even like we love novelty usually. I think that's my personality type. I'm an Enneagram 7. And every time I just read all the words, I'm laughing. It's like, you want to do adventurous stuff all the time, meet new people, novelty. Like, you don't want the same day 2 days in a row. You always want something new. And again, I don't want to like be like, oh, that's how I am. I'm going to embrace this identity, so I can't stick with anything for too long because I just need novelty. But knowing that it is a characteristic of this personality type based on, studies and statistics on other people similar to you, it can really help you dive in and work on your weaknesses if you need to, or just outsource them, the who, not how. Maybe there's
100%.
a who out there who can do all those things that you're not great at, so that you don't have to worry about it. You don't even have to get good at it. Just delegate it.
100%.
Oh, yeah. Love this. I mean, the novelty seeking thing. So, I mean, if we're familiar with the Myers-Briggs, so I am the ENTP, which is the novelty seeking king, which is basically like they're the idea person. They'll have a million ideas, but they do them for 3 months and they're like, oh, I got to do something else now.
Yeah.
So I need to rein that in. I mean, being aware of that is important to me. It's like, I need to finish projects. That is my biggest weakness.
But do you? See, that's the thing that like I really like to think about is like the who, not how concept is like, okay, so if you're not a finisher, then I mean, and I think there's a place for discipline, but I mean, there's a place in this world for people that start things and
yeah. 100%. Well, I hear a lot of the time it's like visionary and integrator, right? So the visionary has all the ideas, they throw it up on the board, and they have a lot of great ideas. They get excited about them, but then they get bored 2 months in of working on them. They get burnt out and they're like, they want the novelty. They want to go run off and chase new ideas. But if they have a solid integrator who can be like, I need one vision to focus on, one project, I'll take it to the finish line. That person will be a great counterbalance to make sure it's like a dynamic duo that actually finishes projects instead of just throwing things at the wall that never come to fruition. And you mentioned too, Matt, you threw out the word modeling. That's incredibly important too. If you just like want to learn, find people in your area, in your market, for those listening who are already there. They're already where you want to be. They're driving the cars that you want to drive, living the life you want to live. And that is the best way to like get to where you want to go. That's how I got into real estate. I found some people who were doing it. They were more successful than I was, and their office was 10 minutes away. Just showed up, introduced myself, and I created that opportunity by being willing to put myself out there and be more of that extrovert of like, hey, let me go meet this person, shake their hand, and just shoot my shot. The worst thing that they can say is no.
Yeah. And it goes along with too, your answer to the question about how do you get guys that are high caliber podcast guests? And you go, Matt, it's not that hard. You just ask. There's always something that they can gain too. And like mentors often gain a lot of value from helping people. They love the fact that people respect the hard work that they did, the journey that they've gone on. And sometimes they get to a place time-wise where they can't.
Right.
But it's surprising how many can and will. So yeah, I love that you said that.
Dude, that's exactly what I'm doing here in Denver. Like we talked about briefly, I moved to Denver from Houston last March, 2021, still trying to figure out what am I doing here? Who am I here? I got my real estate license, but I haven't really done anything with it. I have no sphere really. It's been all Zoom calls and virtual, trying to build this online scalable business that I can do from anywhere. But I'm looking for that what's next thing. And same thing, my mind automatically defaults to who's super successful, who's where I want to be or where I think I want to be. And I'm having that conversation right now with a 41-year-old real estate investor who's pretty much retired, never has to work if he doesn't want to. He loves hustling and doing deals. And we're pretty much talking about how can we work together? How can I help him get to where he wants to be? Just maybe buying back more time. And I can get to where I want to be, tapping into his current database, his resources, his deal flow, so that I can get things rolling here very quickly. It's a who, not how. I don't have to know how. I just have to know the right who and plug in, and then the value exchange can happen.
Yeah, I mean, well, I want to backtrack a little bit because you said the visionary integrator thing, and it kind of reminded me of like what we were talking about a couple months ago.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, so Matt's going to play the visionary here, and I'm going to play the integrator, and then we get like a real hardcore integrator to interview, and we're just sitting on the call, and we're just like, oh, we got two visionaries here. We got two visionaries here. So I mean, I could be a short-term integrator, like I could figure out a system, I could build a system, but I need to pass it off right away because once it's built, I'm done. I can't do do it anymore.
Dude, funny thing is too, this real estate guy I'm talking about, there's a book, I haven't read it. I think it's like an EOS book called Rocket Fuel. But his concern is that we were both too visionary, where we're just going to talk about ideas and never get anything done. So he sent me a link. There's like an assessment on there. If anyone's interested, just Google Rocket Fuel Visionary Assessment or something like that. Maybe 20 questions, and it tells you what percentage of visionary you are to integrator, so that you can kind of get a good read on, am I really all visionary, a lot of ideas, or do I have the skills to actually take things to the finish line, make a process, make a checklist, and kind of work backwards from where I'm trying to go. So that's really helpful.
Yeah, I thought about this a ton. So I've read that book, taking the assessments. Tim's kind of like more of a middle stream between visionary and integrator. I'm more like 90% in the visionary role. So one of the things I'd encourage people to think about is, let's say you're a high visionary. Like, you could also choose fields that are more suited to visionaries. So like Tim and I talk about this all the time. We like to live in the land of ideas instead of the land of things. So like the supply chain type of world, like, seems like not our forte, right? That is very much the land of things. And so what's interesting is, I think if you're in more, like if you have two people that are more visionary in nature, you could slant it towards a visionary type of role, like podcasting is an example, where ideas reign supreme, and visionary. You can almost function semi like an integrator if the industry is more, visionary oriented, or vice versa. So if we were both two integrators, very much would probably go into a process oriented business, but because we both slant visionary, this is what feels like home.
Well, dude, that's the thing with the school system too. I picked my supply chain degree because I thought that it sucked less than accounting or like management.
Right.
I literally just figured out what makes the best median salary that sucks the least. That was my thinking. So I think I might have even forced myself to go into a degree that was not in alignment with the type of person that I wanted to be, or that I am at a core. It didn't really match my personality. So I kind of like forced myself to grow in that area, and it's benefiting me now in certain ways, like processes and systems. And I do kind of love it now, but still, we can get strong and strengthen those weaknesses, but maybe they're not as strong as if we really leaned into our strengths and focused on getting that from, 1 to 10, instead of trying to go from like 2 to 3.
It's almost like, okay, so let's say I'm going to make up an analogy on the spot. It's probably not going to be good, but I'll try. So it's like, if you had somebody that was running in a direction, like, you have two choices. Like, you can have a rubber band, like a very strong, like human-sized rubber band pulling back on them, or you can have a rubber band from behind pulling forward. And like, I think that's kind of like an example.
That's a really cool example, actually.
So, like if you want to pursue your strengths, it's like you're strengthening the rubber band that's propelling you forward. Working on your weaknesses is like lessening the resistance. To me, there's just like, I've done both. And my goodness, I would choose strengthening my strengths every day of the week. You'll make more money, you'll be happier, you'll have more freedom, so on and so forth. And then you get to a place where if you're not overcoming your weaknesses, you're forced to hire, which I think is a really good place to be anyways.
That's good. It was kind of like, I could picture the rubber band and like a little mini guy or something. And it really makes sense of just pushing yourself forward versus having that resistance, or running with like a weighted vest, right? Like carrying that monkey on your back that you really don't enjoy carrying. You don't have to let it go.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'll comment on this. So, this is very important. You still need to get uncomfortable when you're leaning into your strengths. You need to constantly be uncomfortable. Like, if you're not outside of your comfort zone, you're not doing good enough, really. That's really the only way I see it. So, even if you're leaning into your strengths, make sure you're doing so in an uncomfortable way, because if there's no discomfort in your life, you're going to be stagnant, essentially.
Thank you for adding that. I have conversations with my business coach and like my life coach. And my life coach mentioned, she's like works at a therapist. She's like modern therapy type place, right? Where she does life coaching stuff, but she can also talk if you're having a hard time with whatever. But we were talking about optimal stress, because I had automated my life so much where I felt like the Narcos meme, where I'm just like, looking down on myself, and I don't have any friends because everyone's busy working, and I like have automations going on in the background.
Right.
And I had automated everything where I no longer had that optimal level of stress, because we have to be somewhere where we're being challenged enough to be interested. Otherwise we lose interest. Right. So thank you for bringing that point up, Tim, because we've got to have more challenge in our life than we want, so that we can actually continue to grow, because that's when we grow, is when we're uncomfortable.
Right, which is so important because you see it when people retire, they die faster. Like it's statistically, like it's insane how fast people die when they stop working.
Man, this is all really good stuff. I just love like the mindset, the who, not how, the freedom part, but also like challenging yourself, you know, because as entrepreneurs, we're like, I kind of want to pursue easy. I want to have solutions and automations that can like fix these problems so I don't have to deal with them. But then you go and find bigger challenges. And sometimes, I don't know, do you guys ever face this where you have a challenge and you're just like putting it off and procrastinating because you kind of know you need to do it, but like, does it really have to get done? And then it just sits there for like 2 months undone.
All the
I'm
time.
running into that.
Yeah,
all the time.
Yeah.
So for me, go ahead, Tim.
No, you first.
So for me, if it's sitting around that long, somebody else needs to do it. Like that's what I've concluded is that things that are in our wheelhouse or in our alignment, we just do. Like if you look at the tasks, there's tasks that you will do even if you shouldn't because you love them so much. Then there's tasks that like they're a normal amount of resistance. It's like, okay, I don't really want to do that, but I'll just knock it out. And then there's those ones that are lingering. To me, the lingering, like if you look at a quadrant, top one is you love to do them, you're good at them, and then all the way down the quadrant,
like an Eisenhower matrix.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think even Gino, the guy who came out with, EOS, also has a quadrant as well. And it's like that to me always made so much visual sense. And it's like, I should never really do stuff in quadrant 4. Yeah. And even in quadrant 3, like why? So I would say number one, if stuff's sitting around for 2 months, you just need to hire it out. Or if you can't hire it out, like you need to barter it out. If you can't barter it out, you probably just need to do something else.
I love that. That's so good. And I mean, a lot of times we have things that we think we need to do because someone else is doing it. And like your business is working fine without it. You don't necessarily have to. You can just delete it or delegate it, right? One of those things. There's different options. You don't have to like, again, take on that burden if it's not in alignment with what you want to do. Tim, did you want to jump in on that too?
I'm just thinking like addition by subtraction now. Like that's something that I've had to implement so many times. As somebody that has to run so quickly through things, I find myself having way too many jobs all the time. And I always need to take 2 steps back and be like, what is profitable? Like, where am I even making money here? If I'm doing 10 different things, like which one is the one that is valuable? So I'm taking 2 steps back is often one of the best ways to take 5 steps forward.
Man,
100%.
This is awesome. I'm really loving this conversation because we're all about the mindset, but also practicality. And this also kind of ties into the 80-20, the Pareto principle. If you can make a pivot table, I learned how to do this in corporate too. Pareto principle. We literally make a pivot table of all the things like to do or the data, and then you assign weights. Or you can also just see like if you're spending too much money, where's the 80% of your spend going? It's going to be those top 20% lines, and you can just cut down there. And you're going to see a majority of your progress versus worrying about eating at Chipotle twice a year. Like you're not going to trim any expenses there, right? Like focus on those recurring things, those larger pops if you're trying to reduce expenses, for example. A lot of awesome stuff that we're talking about, but is there anything that we're missing? Any other value bombs that you guys would love to add? Let's hear them.
And more. Yes. So I want to go deeper on this because I want to talk about like increasing your production ability. So I think it comes foundationally down to a wrong goal set. So a lot of times the way I used to set goals and the way that I see a lot of people set goals is they go, okay, I need to make $1 million because $1 million buys me X amount of properties, X amount of cash flow. It gets me free. And so I don't think that's wrong to have financial goals in that way. But I think if that's the beginning of your thought process, it's aligned on a result, not aligned on you. So I don't know if it was you that we were talking to, Chris, but we talked about a return on energy. And so return on energy is so pivotal because the lifeblood, in my opinion, of success in business comes from passion and energy. And so if your goals start to shift with how can I do tasks during the day that double, triple, quadruple the amount of energy I have, now I could tackle 2, 3, 4 times more stuff.
Yeah.
And so like if you reworked the system and said, okay, I want to do things that I ultimately still know will bring me financial success, but I want to do things that 4X my energy in life, 4X my passion in life. Then you set the foundation for being able to be the $1 million man or woman, as opposed to I want to make $1 million and I'll do whatever it takes. I've done enough of those years where it's like, I'll do whatever it takes, which usually means a lot of procrastinating, grinding, burnout, etc.
Like pushing water uphill type stuff.
Yep. How could I be a man that's 4 times more energetic and more passionate?
I love that. That's really cool. Just return on energy. focusing on that, it's going to light you up. You're going to procrastinate less because you're not doing things that aren't in alignment. Like if you hate cold calling, focus on YouTube content, right? Attraction marketing. You can scale up there and have a better business than someone who hammers the phone 4 hours a day. It just depends on what you want to do. Totally. Tim, did you have anything you wanted to add to that too?
So yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with the go-giver thing, right? So I mean, like the who, not how go-giver thing is like the most important thing that I probably neglected for a large portion of my career. So I mean, if you're out there listening and you don't know any rich people, go meet some rich people, man. Like just go meet rich people, provide value to them. Don't ask them for anything. That's a mistake.
Yeah.
Okay, go ask them how you could help them. How could I help your business? And
Boom.
the more you do that, you would be amazed. Like ultra successful people tend to think with a abundance mindset. And it's very simple. Why? Because they know they could tell everybody the secret formula, because there is no secret formula. Everybody that is successful is doing the same things, right? You repeat the right activities, you're going to have results. So they're going to tell you everything because they know 90% of the people aren't going to do it. And then of the ones that do it, most of them are going to quit before they find success. So
yeah, 3 feet from gold.
Yeah. Go meet people that have done what you want to do. Like go now.
I love it.
Do it in a week. Put it on your schedule now.
It is actually easier than a lot of people think. Like you just assume, well, how am I just going to go meet some millionaire? You know, join different groups and masterminds, go to some local networking events, right? Be that person who organizes people and just brings them together on Zoom calls. Like I'm a part of the Arate Syndicate business group, and I've been coordinating biweekly calls. And literally I get 20 or 30 people on a call, and I can kind of cherry pick who do I want to connect with, because they all see my name on the emails. And then I'm like, man, that dude's a 7-figure a year earner. That person's an 8-figure a year earner. They're adding so much value. Let me reach out to them and just DM them and say, dude, you have so much knowledge. I'd love to have you on my podcast if you're ever open to it. Boom. You build up rapport for an hour, and then they give you their cell phone number and say, hey, shoot me a text whenever you're in town. I'll buy you dinner. You know, that's how it happens.
Position yourself as an authority. Like try to do that as soon as you possibly can. Because if you manage to position yourself as an authority, you will just become one eventually.
Boom. And of course, that's sometimes you have to overcome the imposter syndrome and the self-doubt. You know, like there's a real estate guy I'm trying to work with here, and, you know, he's telling me to tell him what to do. And I'm like, dude, like you're crushing it in every way. Like, shouldn't you tell me what you want me to do? Like, how am I supposed to propose it if I'm nowhere near your level of success? So sometimes there's like that power dynamics. And I think we have to work on, again, competence leads to confidence. As I do it more, and I'm like, I know this, I'm very competent. I'm going to be super confident about the value that I can bring. So it's almost like fake it till you make it, but just do it enough times to where you believe that you can do it and you actually make it. Right.
Yeah. And I could throw a little twist on this too. So fake it till you make it, I think is good in the sense that it encourages people to have confidence. But I think one tweak that you can make that can allow you to feel maybe a little bit more authentic is a concept called face it till you make it.
Yeah.
And so which good. Then you can switch to a modality where you just tell people, I am going to be the expert in this field because I study an hour a day every single day. So you could actually say things that are true in the present and in the future. Yeah. And some people don't want to do that. They want to do fake it till you make it because they're trying to make a living right now. Right. So I think the heart of what your guys saying is perfect, right? Which is confidence and action. But I think too, if someone feels a little weird with like, I don't want to state that I'm an expert, just say, hey, look, guys, I'm studying this every single day. Like my goal is to be the most knowledgeable person on the planet on this topic, and can accomplish the same thing.
Yeah. And I'm just maybe we could just wrap it here, right? So
yeah, this is so good.
Ignorance on fire is way better than knowledge on ice, right?
Which one of our guests said that?
So
now it's like a
Q&A.
Yeah. Oh, Kent. Yeah.
Awesome.
Kent Clothier.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's so good, man. And I love that podcast. You could just like steal little nuggets and like share it on another show.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, he did it on our show, so
that's
it works.
So good.
Could take his quote, I think.
Yeah.
I credited him.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. But I mean, I do that too sometimes, and I'm like, should I credit this or should I just own it and sound really cool?
Right. You know? Like, well, in a world where everything's already been said, you know, like what do you need to quote? What do you not need
or
to
like,
quote?
if you're just not sure, just say Ben Franklin or Mark Twain said it. And like, chances are someone thinks that they had, initially said that. Yeah. But man, this has been an amazing conversation, guys. I'm sure we could sit here and chat for hours and hours. I've been really enjoying my time here with you guys. Where can our audience go to connect with you? And if you have any last minute takeaways, feel free to share them as well. Like any applicable nuggets that people can go do today.
Yeah, as far as contact, we'll send the links to you. We have an active Facebook group that's growing that we can give free value to anybody that wants to be, to be mentored in that way. And then also our podcast airs on most of the applicable podcasts. And then we also have a YouTube channel that we release. So we'll send you the link so you can put them in the show notes.
Yeah,
absolutely. Get in that Facebook group for real and engage, because we really love the people that engage. We give them free coaching all the time.
That's awesome. And that kind of talks about what we were talking about earlier. It's like reaching out, initiating conversations. You two met over Facebook Messenger and look where you're at now. You're co-hosting a podcast together and we're here chatting too. So it all starts with like initiating conversations with other people that are really cool and that are doing things that you want to do.
If you're always focused on your goal and providing value, like life can go really well for you. Like there's a lot of people that don't want to help certain people because it's like, oh, that's not worth my time or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like when Tim reached out, like I was happy to help. And that relationship fostered into a coaching relationship I had with him, which fostered into all kinds of things like the podcast. What ended up happening is, as a result of connecting with him, he found deals that I was able to buy at $300,000 below their market value.
Wow.
And the cash flow of which like is just insane. The gross rents are $11,300. So one of the things that I want to leave the audience with is that becoming financially free and retired doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, and it doesn't even have to take a lot of transactions. Mm-hmm. We've done hundreds of transactions as real estate agents, but in 5 single family transactions, I went from 0 net income to completely financially free.
Wow.
The biggest reason for that was Tim, because Tim found me a seller that was willing to sell at the right price.
It's amazing.
And so, like just serve, and just recognize that it is only like one deal away sometimes from 0 to retired.
Boom. Well, thank you guys, Tim and Matt. I love this. Like, I'm like, I better stop it before we talk all night. My fiance is like getting ready. It's a birthday weekend.
Let's go.
I was trying to one up Matt again. It's cool.
Dude, that's a mic drop right there. Well, I appreciate you both so much. Let's stay connected for sure. And I'll let you know as soon as this goes live, if you can send over those links. Everyone listening, check out the Facebook group, check out their podcast. I think you got a lot of value from this conversation. I know you did for those listening. So I can't imagine what's in that Facebook group. I really appreciate your guys' time.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
Thanks, guys.